Due to the COVID-19 emergency and in accordance with Section 7E of the Opens Meeting Act, this meeting will be held primarily virtually. At least one representative from the village is present at the Village Hall boardroom, and the virtual meeting will be simulcast for members of the public who do not wish to view the virtual meeting from another location. Pursuant to the executive orders issued by the governor, the number of people who may gather at Village Hall for the meeting is limited due to mandating social distance guidelines and limitations on gatherings. Accordingly, the opportunity to view this virtual meeting at Village Hall will be available on a first-come, first-served basis. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Lake Bluff Business Advisory Committee. Let's see, it's about 7:05. We're going to get started. Drew, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Member Anderson.
Here.
Member Douglas. Member Fisher.
Here.
Member Lawrence.
Here.
Member Lynch. Member Osterline.
Here.
Member DeRossier.
Here.
And Member Zitzowitz.
Here.
All right.
Thanks.
Zeidowitz. Sorry. Is it Zitzowitz? Zitzowitz. I said it right. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. All right. So you have a quorum.
Great. Okay, moving on. Next on the agenda, consideration of the minutes of the November 30th, 2021 regular meeting. Can we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I so move.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Deb. Were there any changes? Did anyone have any changes? Okay, hearing none. Drew, is it a roll call?
It is a roll call vote.
Roll call.
Okay. Member Anderson.
Present. Or here. Yeah. Aye.
Yes. The answer would be yes or no, or aye or nay. Member Fisher.
Yes.
Member Lawrence.
Yes.
Member Osterline.
Yes.
Member DeRossier.
Yes.
And Member Zitzowitz.
Yes.
Great. All right. Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. Non-agenda items and visitors. At this point in the meeting, the chair and the committee allocate 15 minutes for those individuals who would like to address the committee on any matters not listed on the agenda. Each person addressing the committee is asked to limit their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. And we have no one here in the boardroom. Do we have anyone online, Drew?
We have no one online. We had one there a moment ago, but they jumped off. My guess is it's a member who's trying to participate telephonically, but couldn't join on. But so the answer is no.
Okay. Do you want to, should we wait a minute, or you think we're good?
No, I think they'll try back. I think you're okay.
Okay, okay. Okay, so the next point on the agenda is setting the order of the meeting. Would anyone like to change the order of the meeting this evening? I think we have just a few things on our agenda, but if anyone wants to change them, we're all ears. No?
No.
Okay, great. And that brings us to agenda item 6, a discussion regarding the evaluation of the economy of the village and actions to promote the economic health of the business community. We good? Okay.
Yes.
So I think, first of all, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I know there was a tremendous amount of reading that we had to do in the last several weeks, so I appreciate that folks have done their reading. I think that Drew has put together a presentation, which you all should have gotten by email, so you can look over, and he's going to kind of go through that. And then we also have a special presenter tonight, Sam Badger, who comes to us with a background in commercial real estate, and I think many of you know him. So hi Sam. He's going to give us a little insight on the commercial real estate market right now. So Drew,
Sure.
you want to start, Drew?
I do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So, this is the, I'm getting some feedback. Can everybody mute really quick? Some reason getting feedback.
It's Jeff Lynch trying to join in.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
Yeah, we have no great connection. Kind of sucky.
Well,
Can
can
you
you,
just
can you mute? Well, you know, I can try to mute you. Hold on, stand by.
Mute. We'll mute.
Gotcha. Okay, here we go. All right. Yep, thank you. They are. Mine are.
I'm not on.
So yeah, we're off. Thank you, Bill. Okay. So, so tonight the focus of the conversation is going to be around going through the mission, which will take us through where we want to end up, and that's what we've talked about. Joe and I and others, and we talked about this at the first meeting, was creating an economic development or business plan for the community. And the first thing to do is to really focus on what this group's mission is, as given by the Board of Trustees. And that's really evaluating the economy of the village periodically, and then identifying actions on how to promote the economic health of our business community. And again, like we talked about, is developing a plan. And we'll start that tonight by going through a SWOT analysis and look at a data dive and try to keep the end in mind, so to speak. And so how would we do that? And the first thing to do is part of this slide, and hopefully everybody had a chance to look at this. And given each of your training and professional background, I think you may approach this differently, but what I tried to do here is try to put together some metrics, again, trying to keep the end in mind, how we might evaluate the economy of the village periodically. Brad, you may look at this and focus on items 7, 8, 9, and so forth, while others may come to this, John, looking at 4 or 3 and kind of where your mindset is. But maybe we develop some sort of indices or something, but again, to try to have some sort of metric that we can gauge this, so when we communicate to the board, and again, it could be 1, none, or all of these, but again, wanted to put that seed out there, those seeds out there, to keep this in mind as we proceed through this process. Is there any questions about this? All right. Okay.
No, not about the layout, Drew, but just so I can learn a little bit more. Is there a breakdown that we can look at that has the different categories listed here, or some of them anyway, as far as the revenue that the village takes in and the percentage of the various things listed that it gets its revenue from?
Yes, everything I listed here is something I can get my hands on really easy.
Cool.
And things that I see generally we're already looking at. So like I said, identify the actions. So how do we do this? Development plan, start with a SWOT. So we're going to look at the village's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Ooh, going too far. So I am fat-fingered tonight. Forgive me. So we'll start with a data dive, and when we do this, and I'm going to turn it over to our guest and let Sam take us through this. But when we're looking at this and when we're talking about this, please keep in mind, there's lots of past studies and plans and information that can help inform this plan, and that's why the homework that we provided everybody, hopefully there's a lot of information and it's a lot to take in, but hopefully you had a chance to look at those things and say, hey, maybe the village really pursued this with enough gusto or devoted enough resources to a lot of these activities, or should we go back and revisit some of these things, or what's relevant, what's not, what should we still be doing, what should we not be doing? So there's a lot of work already done, and take those and maybe reprioritize those and build on those ideas. Whether they be the Waukegan Road Corridor or the Central Business District plans going back to 1998 that the village is still chipping away at. We talked a little bit at the last meeting about the branding program, but there's I think there's a lot of information there that we can build on to help fill in some of these gaps. I think will come from this process. So I'm going to step out of this and let our guest, Sam, take over. And I see Mr. Douglas has joined us, so I'm going to promote him. So,
Well, so thank you, Drew. You know, I guess I come to you as kind of a expert in commercial real estate. I specialize in industrial commercial real estate in Lake County in Southeast Wisconsin. I've been doing it for over 20 years. I can speak to the retail and the office markets as well. And I can kind of give you a backdrop of those markets today and over the last few years. And then I can zero in on overall Chicago, you know, and then and drill down to Lake County. And then I've also got another, what we call a survey of information of what's available in Lake Bluff today. If a commercial real estate agent, you know, if John came to me and said, hey, where's the retail space in Lake Bluff? You know, I would run this survey you know, of available spaces in Lake Bluff. And so I can certainly attest to that and the market and the strength of the market, you know, obviously to some of the other issues that you guys are drilling down into. You know, I'll let you address those. So let me see if I can share my screen here. And I assume you can see this, right?
yes, we're seeing there we go.
Yeah, you're seeing it. Okay. So this is just a quick couple slides on Lake County itself. Actually, we ended up I'm going to go macro first and then go down into Lake County. So this slide just gives you a quick little representation of kind of the vacancy rates in the Lake or the Chicago market itself. If you look at like suburban office in Chicago, the vacancy rate of 18% to 20 to 24%. No surprise, really. This is obviously COVID related. Everybody's world is different these days with COVID. And you can see that the actual vacancy rates in office have sort of tracked as you might expect. Nobody's going, or people have not gone into the office nearly as much. What you're seeing here is the end of leases that are coming due that end up, those occupants no longer decide to lease that space. And so therefore the vacancy rates goes up. That's a direct result of COVID and what I'm sure everybody's very much aware, whether you're working there yourselves or not in the boardroom today. We're all doing this via Zoom. This is just a result of the market itself and COVID. You know, on a side note, what, you know, the kind of the gist of the thought process, I should say, of what real estate companies and where we're sort of pretending where the market's going to end up going, we're going to be at a very high vacancy rate in office for a while. You know, whether it's Allstate or you hear some of these big occupiers that are just literally getting out of it and adopting a hybrid model, that's going to ring true. There's other companies that you may be part of, law firms, real estate firms, some of the other high office users that are trying their best to get back into the office itself. But I think the general gist is that we're going to have a very high vacancy rate in the suburbs for a while. I'll show you the slide on Lake County as well, but this will hold true, I believe, in Lake Bluff as well. Retail, same idea. You know, that retail numbers have gone up, steadily gone up. The numbers when at publication, we didn't have the latest numbers for the fourth quarter yet, but I can assure you that it's the trend has continued on. It's going to go higher in retail. As you can imagine, you know, everybody is clicking on the easy button and ordering stuff through Amazon. That trend is going to continue for the foreseeable future. That takes us right into industrial. When you think of industrial, when I think of industrial, think manufacturing plants. You know, Profile Plastics is a good example of a manufacturing plant in Lake Bluff itself. But then you have warehouses as well. And so think of the U-Line warehouse that's on 41, which is technically North Chicago, not Lake Bluff. But then there's Homeworks is a big occupier in Lake Bluff itself. That's a warehousing company that is big into the e-commerce world as well. E-commerce has done wonders for warehouse vacancy rates. As you can see here, it's steadily gone down in Chicago as a whole, and that trend seems to be continuing. In response to that, and what we're seeing is just a massive amount of building that's overall in the market. It doesn't really, you know, I could go on for hours on that as it pertains to Lake Bluff. There's no new space for developing new warehouses, so it's really not going to be on our, you know, on our radar at all. You know, if I'm going into the Lake County specific as opposed to Chicago, you know, we had a couple big deals in 21 that sort of pushed that number down a little bit. In retail, we've seen it continue to rise, as I mentioned before, overall in Chicago. But oddly enough, vacancy rate in industrial has also risen. But if you look at the big differences here, 18, also 18, but then we're talking about a vacancy rate of like 4%, which is really minimal. It historically is very low for vacancy rates in Lake County. We don't drill down that on Lake Bluff as a, you know, kind of our marketing department in terms of gathering stats. So what I did was I just put together a survey, as I mentioned before. This, you know, if I just took a quick survey of what is available in Lake Bluff and for lease, and it doesn't aggregate them quite as well as I would have liked, but you know, here, this is just a very basic map. This shows you where the vacant spaces are. Here's the addresses. I think the key here, property size really doesn't mean anything. That's the total size of the building, but space available gives you a sense of what's available in that building itself. Here in property type, it does tell you what's there. So if you to me, what stands out to me is office. You know, office medical. You know, more office. To me, it's most of the vacancies in Lake Bluff are office space. Not surprising. That trends with the market itself. You've got a little bit of industrial and a little bit of retail that's available on the market itself. So, you know, sorry, I'm throwing out a lot of information. I could go through each of the vacancies that are out there. Some of it, to me, isn't Lake Bluff. This is Nagelcourt. This is Knollwood. You know, here's obviously, you know, down by the Target, a little bit of space. Downtown, there's a couple units downtown. So I don't know the market quite as well locally in terms of the individual properties itself. I'm more on the industrial side of things. I can tell you Lake Bluff industrially is in great shape. I mean, it's got you know, like I said, you run a survey and it says like there's a 70,000 square foot space that's available. Well, that's actually North Chicago. That's not Lake Bluff. The business districts, the industrial districts are very, our vacancy rate is very, very low. There's not much, if anything, that's available. So, sorry, I know it's probably a lot of information that I'm just spitting out there. I'm happy to, if you guys have any questions about the market or specific, I'd be happy to help you with that. If you got any ideas, feel free to ask away. So, but that's what I've come prepared to talk a little bit about. So.
Yeah, thanks, Brad. And just so that everybody on the advisory board knows, I actually can get and have the actual detailed data for Lake Bluff in terms of retail, industrial, and flex space. We can get that information from Lake County Partners. And the numbers have, actually, they're as good as or better than what Brad reported, and that's been consistent for a good while. I mean, they haven't been struggling since, I want to say 9, 10, coming out of the 08 economic recession, that generally our numbers are single digit. But I can provide that, and I'll send it to everybody, because that gets to the, how we evaluate our economy. I can give you some temporal data over the last 5, 10 years and graph that out for you. I think that'll be helpful to have that kind of historical perspective, if you will. But I did a very poor job, apologies, Sam, by introducing you. Sam has served on the Village's Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals. How long was your sentence, Brad? I'm sorry, Sam, you were on there for.
I don't really think of it as a sentence. Together, it was my pleasure to serve on the board for 12 years.
12 years, yeah. So we thank you for that. But as a commercial development professional, I wanted him to be here as a resource to you all as you consider, hopefully, again, you had a chance to dig in the Waukegan Road Corridor Plan and think about some of the things that, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit on the presentation and actually steal this back from you, Sam. So let me jump ahead a smidge. So jumping to this opportunity slide, I'm going to jump a little bit around here. It's going to be a little unorthodox, so please work with me, but I also want to respect Sam's time. So one of the things that I wanted to ask Sam is, one of the things that we've identified, the village is certainly looking at, is this 41-170 interchange project. The state is in phase 2 of redoing that intersection. It is glacial is probably the best descriptor describing how these things are going to be moving down the pike with them. But at some point, that intersection is going to get redone and rebuilt. It's going to be very disrupted for an extended period of time. But there are a number of properties in and around that area that long-term plans of the village have identified that as the village should seek annexation of those properties and try to maximize their utility for the village's good, whether it be economics and social and all those criteria. I guess I wanted to ask you is it typical in the commercial world for that to be, what's the chicken and the egg with that? Is that something that, would you think most business people looking to invest in a property are going to wait till the improvement's done? Are they going to get in 5 years before, 10 years before, 5 minutes before? What have you witnessed mostly?
I think that I think they're gonna, when there's an idea of what's gonna be there. I mean, there's always that are investors that are out there that are gonna on the come, they're gonna perhaps buy at something where before the decision's really been made. But I think mostly though, I mean it's and I'm looking at this one office building that's kind of right on the just north of 176 that's on 41 that it's gray and that's oddly enough that's where most of your vacancy, I guess not oddly enough, I think it's pretty self-explanatory why most of the vacancy is right there in that building that's just to the north.
If that's in the northeast corner, that's actually not in the village? but it's
Right.
very close proximity. So, but it's been something that the villages, that particular property and others around it, the villages look to annex over time.
Right. Well, and that one is probably, I don't know if half of it's vacant, but a big chunk of it, I mean, it's got 10 different offerings right now. It's hard to say when people are going to jump in on this. I think that when it becomes more clear and then it's going to be that something's actually going to happen. I mean, people might sort of jump on those opportunities that are out there. But then again, it's also, what can go there and what's, you're certainly not going to you're not putting any industrial right there. That's out the door. Is there some sort of a retail or office component that makes sense? But it's hard to say. It's because I don't have a really good answer for you.
Yeah. Well, if you
Can I,
did,
can I ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
Sam, I appreciate your input. Years ago, and you and I both served on the plan commission together, but when we were talking about the Lake Bluff Industrial Park, the push was to move it and advance zoning to accommodate retail, because we saw retail as kind of the future for that area within the village. Pasquazi's came in. I don't know their sales tax revenue numbers, but it seems like it's been a great spot for them, doing a combination of indoor and outdoor retail. If office is in a decline and likely in a decline for a long time, would you think it beneficial to the village to look at retail opportunities on a larger scale? Because the little mom and pop stores are probably the hardest hit. But if we could get another larger retailer, big box type store in that location, what would your thoughts on that from a commercial real estate perspective be?
I think there are a lot of larger retailer type of things that have in the greater Chicago area that have integrated in industrial parks. There are a number of different industrial parks that have relaxed their zoning to allow more retail in a similar fashion as Lake Bluff did. Obviously, Pasquazi's is a fantastic use and retail use for Lake Bluff. I mean, the industrial park is, it's a real cross section now, right? I mean, you've got office, you've got sports, you've got medical, you've got and industrial. The nice thing about industrial, and I said it on the board when I was with you before, is that they bring employees to the village that are spending their money at lunches and so forth. But over time, it's going to be a little bit of a softer industrial use. Not as many trucks. That you don't have. There's in actual manufacturers that are in the park. You've got a handful, right? You got Profile Plastics. There may be a couple others that are actually making something. The rest of our warehousing or of some other type of office use that are in that park. So I think we should encourage it. I think it's the type of retail, but it's hard to get retail these days that make a lot of sense. I mean, if you look at, the whole mall concept is clearly out the door. The Melody Farms retail, is successful by all accounts. There's not totally standalone, but they're standalone-ish type of retailers make sense and have been successful. So, I mean, if we could find more like that, I think we should encourage it. But at the same time, I said this before when we were on the board, you wouldn't want to preclude or put up any barriers to the existing, good neighbors that you have in the park. I think so. Pasquazi's and Profile Plastics have lived perfectly together. And whatever you do, I wouldn't want to push those guys out. So.
And for those of you who did not get a chance to look at this, what I'm showing is the cover page to the Village's Waukegan Road Corridor study that was done just over 10 years ago. Shockingly, I find it hard to believe it's that old already, but this plan is talking about a lot of things that Brad and Sam are, and the idea is that the Village looked at these structures and said, you know, what is the expected life or utility of these structures out there? Do they have legs to last longer? Should we try to do things to help improve the tenancy out there and flexibility? So the Village did exactly what Brad was talking about, was to modify its regulations, to its zoning regulations, to make it easier by giving property owners and brokers a longer list of, you know, as of right uses that could be done in those structures, and improve the odds that they're going to be leased out. And that there's going to be people there that work there and have jobs and will come and eat and shop in the community. And it's been working. The Village has done that. I think that the Waukegan Road Corridor has a lot of I would say work not yet complete yet, and there's more to be done in terms of opening up the door to additional uses. And so I just throw that out there again for folks who haven't had a chance to look at that, but that's really that in a nutshell. And the Village did some of that. It talked about increasing some of the zoning restrictions, like allowing for taller buildings for clear story storage. Is that the phrase, Sam?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, doing those types of zoning relief so they can stack product taller, which in more contemporary structures. A lot of these buildings were built, you know, post-war, and so they're not built to more contemporary standards. So there were some of the things, those are some of the other issues the Village talked about. Again, increased height, allowing setbacks closer to streets to increase parking for a more retail or more diverse uses again. So the Village tried to open the door on those, and maybe that's one of the things that can be brought back up again as part of this plan, is to kind of maybe go revisit that, and maybe, you know, could more regulations be loosened to help facilitate tenancy out there, knowing that, as Sam said, that, you know, office is going to be hurting for some time.
Yeah, office is going to be tough. I mean, it's and these buildings themselves, I mean, you've got a very low, this is a great shot of it, of course, and you know, that big building in the middle is, you've got a single tenant in there that's taken the entire building. That's, and then you've got, there's one building that's actually on the market for sale, and that's the one that's just to the north of the big one. Bingo. Yep, exactly right. And you've got, it's under contract to a developer that, you know, is going to have a
Storage facility.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I don't know all the, yeah, I'm sure you're probably more familiar with it than I am. So I know they're working their way through things, but it's got a little bit of extra land. I think the guy was, had some ideas, but it's still it's a decent use, it sounded like to me. Certainly that wasn't going to add a whole lot of traffic. That's one of the things that you see all the time in our world right now is in redevelopments these days, is that is impact on traffic. And, you know, we're fortunate that in Lake Bluff that there's really no place where Amazon can drop down and put a warehouse right in front of us and have 1,000 little vehicles that are flying all over the place. But that's kind of the big thing, is that they want to be as close, and e-commerce companies want to be as close as to the rooftops as possible. We don't have to worry about that in Lake Bluff, fortunately, but that's the big thing these days is traffic.
Sam, related to that, Sam, is there something in between those enormous buildings that, like an Amazon operates just north in Wisconsin there, that's in between there, kind of like a smaller, more regional distribution center is that being done?
Certainly. Yeah, no, and actually you don't have to go to Wisconsin. I just leased 500,000 feet to Amazon in Waukegan by the old Lakers Mall. site where the casino's supposed to go, but right Abbott Park, just a little bit further north, there's 2 Amazon locations. One's 600,000 feet, one's 500. They do get smaller. There's one in Mundelein that's like 100,000 square feet, and it's these guys have it drilled down. Their technology is so precise that they can they have the items that are most likely to go closest to the consumer where it is, and they so in Mundelein, if you're familiar with Mundelein, kind of along Butterfield Road and in Allenson, there's a 100,000 square foot Amazon facility. What is, I sort of made the traffic thing sound maybe a little bit worse than it is. These guys are incredible in the way that they regulate, and they don't start delivering at 8 o'clock in the morning when everyone's dropping their kids off at school and so forth. They do it off hours, and they do it on purpose because it's better for them not to get stuck in traffic as well as everybody else. So that Amazon is you could go on for days talking about Amazon. So, but yeah, there are smaller facilities that even something of that size, smaller than the 250 that is.
And I was gonna say that was just gonna tell people that's about 250,000 square feet. If you're, so a little bit less than half of this is what we're talking about in terms of scale.
Mm-hmm. Those guys have signed a lease for, I think, another 5 or 6 years. So I don't think they're going anywhere.
That's great for the village.
Yep.
And and that's for those people who have not had a chance to sink their teeth yet into the Waukegan Road corridor study. That was one of the things we were looking at, is can we find these unicorns, people that come in that are e-commerce, that have low traffic, high sales tax dollars, and that generate lots of revenue for the village, and have minimal impacts in terms of demand for services or impacts on our transportation systems. So I think everybody's looking for those same type of users.
Right.
And there's only so many.
CDW.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
CDW. So, but the good news is that everything is leased up. The majority of the space is leased up, and it's a pretty vibrant, healthy industrial market. And in retail wise, it's really not that bad at all. The real sore thumb really is office, which Lake Bluff is doing better than the overall economy on that front.
And part of it's because we don't have a lot of it.
Right.
I was just curious, and I just had a question because I was kind of looking at the land use. Do we actually, does Lake Bluff own the, not that we own it, but is it in our jurisdiction, the southwest corner of Waukegan and 176 there across from the mobile gas station, that open piece of land right there?
No, that's Lake Forest.
That's Lake Forest, okay.
Yeah. I guess on that note, Sam, is there things that you see in the marketplace, trends that we need to be thinking about as we develop business plans for the community, that Lake Bluff can be ahead of the curve if possible, if we start doing X, Y, or Z?
The thing that I always, and you may recall, and Brad probably does too, is that it's just, once you have a plan and a desire of the type of business that you want in Lake Bluff, is try to make it as streamlined as possible to try and get those companies in there, and not put up barriers to entry. That once you decide on that, whatever that type of business is, whether it's the Pasquazes of the world, streamlining business is good for everybody, as long as it fits the criteria that you're looking for. Right now, in terms of like overall zoning types of stuff, that these properties that you have in the industrial park, and from a development standpoint outside, there's their value is such that they're to redevelop into something else would be very, very expensive for somebody to undertake. And so, think of a large plot of land like Mariani's, is the only one that is kind of an open, more of a land value type of site versus anywhere else in the park. You know, it doesn't from a structures. You know, the structures that are on all these sites or properties in Lake Bluff are such that it's way above redevelopment value at this point. Think of Shepherd Chevrolet. You know, at one point it was so outdated, and at that point it sold for a number that made sense to target to, you know, purchase it and redevelop it into a store. So, but I just think that fortunately we don't have a lot of those, you know, properties, opportunities within the boundaries. So,
So
yeah,
to the point, so the idea of maximizing the ability to have tenants breaking, you know, going with the vision and taking down those barriers, that should be our MO.
Yeah, yeah. And I think you've already been doing a good job, because if it's as a result, I mean, you know, at least your business parks are virtually full, other than the office.
Speak to the point where you said just a moment ago about, you know, the land, the barriers to redevelop these properties are such that we wouldn't see that. Is there any, I've heard from time to time people suggest allowing multifamily in this district. What are your thoughts on that?
So I would be very hesitant to have multifamily involved with that. I think you're bringing a component in that's a little bit different than even the retail at the north end. I would hotel. I know that was a concept that was floating around there for a little bit a few years ago. I would just be very hesitant about bringing, you know, full-time residents into that park. We don't see a lot of that at all. I can't think of one off the top of my head. We're in an industrial park, business park, corporate park, also has multifamily in it. You know, they may border each other. The issue that a lot of times, you know, 18-wheelers and kids on tricycles are usually a bad combination. But even beyond that, if you just had it bordered so that they were next to each other, it's just not, usually presents a problem for both, right? You know, you've got operations that are ongoing, you know, trucks that are making noise when they back up, and, you know, next to people that are living. That just usually is a bad combination. We don't see that really anywhere. I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Okay.
You do see hotel uses in the industrial area, office park settings though, don't you, Sam?
Well, I mean, if you look at it like Conway, yeah.
I mean, the most recent hotel that opened.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah, no, that's a little bit different story, because you're talking about an office park. I see what you're saying, but that's an office park. You don't have, you know, you have like delivery trucks, right? That may be making deliveries to office buildings, but you're not having, you know, that their main primary function as a business, shipping and receiving product, is a little bit different, and they don't do that in Conway. So
would you put a finer point on that too, Sam? Would you consider that Class A office space?
Oh yeah. I wouldn't. Yeah, what we have in Lake Bluff, right there in the business park is not what you would. Is not. I would say that we're Class B, Class C ish, whereas Conway is Class A. It's a good point. Thanks.
And that distinction, a Class A office park would have the ability, clearly, as it has, to be able to support and draw a hotelier.
Well, actually, what's interesting there is that the reason they develop, I mean, that's almost a component of the market, right? That the office market is such that the guy that owned that land site decided to develop a hotel rather than another office building. So, but yeah, it's a different zoning. It's clearly, it's a Class A office park, but it's just straight up office. You couldn't put in a manufacturing plant or a warehouse there, if you wanted to. So, that's a little bit different than what we've got here in Lake Bluff.
And Sam, do you remember, were you on the PCZBA when they talked about a hotel idea several years ago? Do you remember that conversation? Kind of, could you give us a little history on that? Why it didn't really move forward? Does it have to do with what we were just talking about, just the Class B, Class C?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, yeah, I was on the board at the time, and I was, I think I was pretty, as I recall, pretty vocal in opposition of the concept, just for the reasons that I threw out there earlier today. You know, it was more of a conversation piece more than anything else. I'm not sure how.
There was no application, it was just an idea for land use.
Well, right, it was an idea at the time, and didn't it, Drew? Didn't it sort of code? Weren't we talking specifically about the Shepherd Chevrolet, the Target site at the time? Wasn't that?
I think that's right. Yeah.
And the reason, and the only reason I would ever, to me, I mean, that would be, obviously, it's almost a little bit separated. Obviously, they're joined, as you can see. Of course, the roads are now joined. But you know, if you had it at one end, you know, maybe there's an idea, and that's why it was part of the conversation. But even now, I still go back and say that the Target site and that retail site would still be it's just a bad idea, I think, to have residential there at the same time, residential or a hotel with trucks. At the time, there was a manufacturing plant. It has changed. That's Mariani's occupying that building that's just to the south of Target, on that little 30,000 square foot building across the one from where the self-storage is on. It's just, but you do have a manufacturing company and a Homeworks, which is one of your largest occupants, the 250 that's right there, that you've got trucks. And, you know, I think they operate, you know, certainly 2 shifts, maybe not 3 shifts, but, you know, you've got trucks rolling in and out at times that, you know, may not be so welcome in the residential world.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've done a lot of the talking, so apologies to the committee. I'm certainly, anybody else who has questions, feel free to take advantage of Sam's presence here tonight.
Sam, I agree 100% with you about the need or lack of need for additional office space. I think a hotel, you know, boutique hotel potentially could have legs in a location like that. But just by virtue of the amount of out-of-town guests or people that want to be closer to the North Shore than out by the tollway. But I do think, and I don't think it's necessarily something the village would want to attract, but I think a higher density rental, residential, multifamily dwelling area would be very, very well received, because we've got a huge need for rental properties.
Yeah, my argument would be is the proximity to what your existing area occupants are right there, and if there is some sort of separation between the two, I can see that. If you brought them on the east side of the railroad tracks, I can certainly see that. I'm putting on more of my residential citizen hat rather than real estate hat. I do, yeah, the rental properties that's been a story for however many years, that there just hasn't been a lot of affordable housing, available housing, you know, ideas for, you know, when you're done having, you know, having the home, you want to sell the home, you know, a condo, you know, start talking about, you know, downtown redevelopment. I totally get the demand, and I'll defer to you and your business in terms of residential occupancy. I'm just trying to think of the, proximity to trucks and noise and all that, I think that could be a struggle. So, and we haven't seen that certainly in the office park, yeah, but in industrial high traffic areas like we've got right here, you don't see a lot of that.
Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Mhm.
Regarding, this idea that you're discussing, what's happened with the Jawa property, just east of the, the water treatment plant? Years ago, there was talk of doing something there. I think it was senior citizen housing, but I haven't heard anything about that in 10 years. Anybody have any news on any thoughts being done in that area?
Nothing is the answer. The village is still title holder of those 10 acres. I think the CLC Jawa water utility has always shown interest in acquiring that piece from the village, which to some degree makes sense for them to increase the buffer around their property. But that is, your memory is correct, Rob, that was the property the village issued back in, I want to say 2006. 2007 issued a request for proposals for a senior housing facility and required, had certain restrictions on how that would be developed. I think it had a 100-foot buffer requirement, a 3-story limit. But the idea of kind of being a full continuum of care opportunity, and ultimately didn't pull the trigger on a development, and it sat, and that's, again, it's still in the village's control, and the village has chosen to hold on to it. And I'll get to that later in terms of the village's role as a property owner and, land banking. That's something that the village has done to wait for the right development. And whether that be, be a participant in the development, or, they can trade land, those are all things in our arsenal to do. But the short answer is nothing is on the horizon. The village was approached a long time ago about somebody trying to redevelop that land, but there's been nothing. There hasn't been any sort of pitches to the village in years.
Do you think that's because of the obstacles put up by the village, or because of a lack of demand? Because since this was discussed at the village, there's been 2 large retirement facilities, nursing facilities developed within a couple miles of there.
That's true. Yeah. Brad, I think at the end of the day, my recollection, when I first came to the village back in 2008, this was on the tail end and it was fizzling out, that's how I would describe it, that there were a number of restrictions on how that property could be developed, and the universe of developers that were interested probably went, it was down to like 1 or 2, and then shortly thereafter 1. So, the universe of players willing to do what the village was looking to do. And again, at that time, it was a rapidly changing senior housing market. Don't know, hard to know. That was a very long time ago now.
Is that
So Drew, what is the process for the village to maybe look at the restrictions they placed on it before and either decide if they still feel that those are valid, and then reach out to, what is the village's process as far as maybe saying, we've changed a few things about it, we're trying to make it easier to be developed. How does the village go about getting or reaching out to people to come in and take a look at developing it again?
Are you talking about this particular property or any?
This or any property in general?
Yeah, it becomes a priority of the village board. They decide that they want to see what, there's interest in the market to do something, and that they probably should check their intestinal fortitude that they want to go through with it. I will tell you that Brad maybe remembers, and others remember, there was a lot of hand-wringing over this property getting developed, and that's why ultimately there were a number of restrictions placed on that RFP, because of a lot of the neighborhood folks were not necessarily keen on having something happen. They've enjoyed having nothing next to them in a forest for a very long time. So the idea of change is always difficult. So I think a board would just have to decide they want to see what's out there. Put a request for proposals, and you can be as specific as what you want for that type of use. This area is zoned residential. So it's Hard to know if there'd be a great amount of interest, but I suspect there could be some, and given that
But
there's,
what's the underlying, isn't it estate zoning currently?
this particular, no.
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 What is it?
No. Similar to the West Terrace, I think, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah, I think it's, I want to say it's either R3 or,
Three?
I think, yeah, give me 1 second, Brad.
Yeah, because I thought originally Birkdale, Thornwood, Prospect there was supposed to head all the way back to.
They were.
Yeah.
Mhm. They were.
There were sewer and water improvements placed out in there.
Yeah,
Right.
Uh,
Isn't there a portion?
And I thought one of the issues was access onto 176, because I remember I did bring a client, not part of the RFP, but it brought a client, and it was hard to envision how you were going to get people out onto 176 and whether IDOT would be involved, you know, whether they would allow that even.
Yeah, they would have to get a curb cut, yeah.
And I
Yeah,
feel
so
like, I feel like we talked about that with,
Yeah, but we have don't we already have public right of ways
Okay,
going into that property from
You
the
know,
West Terrace?
I misspoke. It has been rezoned as Rio, which is,
Yes, but-
yeah, recreation, institutional, open space, but it is adjacent to the R2.
Really?
Yeah,
And that I think is from a development standpoint, the underlying zoning is what throws a red flag to potential developers.
Right.
I'd agree with that.
Yep.
It's just another hurdle to have to get through. But you can see that, yeah, here I am pointing to the screen, but I can't.
what do you want to point to,
But
Sam?
yeah, exactly. You got it right there.
Yeah.
It's right there. I mean, you can see that overlay was from a hangover from, you know, the previous, you know, kind of,
Yeah, it was definitely platted a continuation of
Yeah.
the terrace,
It was.
right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
there's
it's also
right of
that-
way. I think there's still existing right of ways where that,
Oh, there's
Yeah.
there's some old pavement and
There.
old sidewalks,
you don't have to go out to 176 is my point.
yeah.
But there were some reasons why they didn't want to drive traffic through the neighborhood,
Well,
you know,
because
so
the
that's why they
Because
were.
the neighbors.
right.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
Of
safety.
course.
yeah, I remember it being
Yeah.
higher. It was a much higher density coming out of there than it is just single family homes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, perhaps the same reason like Tingley Oaks is one in and out, right? The idea, same issue, right?
Right. Right.
Connectivity is typically viewed as difficult.
Or so is there's one in and out at Stonebridge. So just
Same.
a quick question, you know, we're talking about this area, you know, east of Mariani, but what is the situation with Stonebridge's future? You know, any thoughts on that? That to me would seem the first thing.
Gary, that is my favorite question and one that I asked almost at every board. So,
So the good news is that the village has, we have reached agreement. We are no longer in litigation. And there's a settlement agreement that's available on the village's website. The long story short is the developer is pursuing certain things. The village is pursuing, the certain things they are pursuing is to re-subdivide that property, to bring it back as close as they can to its original zoning. And I think it's going to carve it up into 5 different lots, but remove the existing plat of survey. To the extent that we can undo it, because the right-of-way actually has to stay, because that was already dedicated to the village, but, so they're gonna really untangle what was done before, and they're gonna seek to untangle and remove the restrictive covenants on the front 10 acres and the conservancy. And the village is going to allow the developer to tear down the manor house, and after a specific period of marketing by a national real estate firm, they have the ability to tear down the gatehouse as well, but only after that a good try is given. The village will maintain a control element over the front 10 acres until and unless the property is developed as a new PRD, and then the village can negotiate with the then developer to try to continue that protection of the front 10 acres of that historic Jens Jensen landscaping area. But so the short answer is it's in flux. The developer appears to have interest in marketing the property to others to develop. He's untangling the subdivision and restrictions on the property that were instituted many moons ago. And the developer is going to work with the village on selecting that commercial real estate broker, and we hope that'll take place very soon. So hopefully, yeah, so maybe it gets to be back on the market soon, and see if there's other interest in developing that large, beautiful property just east of the Forest Preserve.
But with the underlying zoning being estate zoning.
Yes,
So by right,
Yes.
it'll go back to just 5 or 6 lots.
yes,
So we're basically returning it to what it was 20 years ago, minus a restriction. Well, back then we could have torn down the historic. It's basically reverting it to what it was prior to any development attempt.
clean
Yes.
slate, so to speak.
But with still the restrictive zoning as far as lot size.
Yes, but presumably, I think most people think that any developer is going to come in and try to do that as a PRD.
Right.
And that might be a place where we might have the opportunity to do multifamily at some, in some way back in there. If we're really indeed looking to add some multifamily units somewhere within the village.
And
And if a new developer is looking to start over, sure.
Well, and that's how the project that was approved had detached single-family homes, it had attached single-family homes, and it had condos. So it had a variety of housing product contemplated.
I'd be happy to stick around if you have any more questions. But if not, I'll let you go back to your work here. So, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Sam,
Thank
so
you.
much.
You bet. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Back to work. So we talked about the village has a number of roles in economic development and business support. And apparently, we also have a way of getting in the way of business, as Sam alluded to. So the village certainly has a role in the regulations of, whether it be zoning, building, or other activities like liquor licenses. The village, in terms of economic development, has played a role over time in terms of maintaining the business that we have here, retention, reaching out to business owners, whether they be Canals or Heinen's or the others, meeting with business owners and operators to see how are they doing, what can the village be doing for them. Attraction to some degree, we've worked, and actually Sam was here when we were trying to chase down a brewery for the industrial park at one point, but also talking to other businesses in town about expanding. So that's, again, a role the village plays. We've done incentives. We talked about the target development. Village did a 10-year sales tax sharing agreement with them to help get them here. That continues to pay dividends for the village, again, where land use decisions create revenue for the community and open up the door for us to do capital projects that we wouldn't otherwise been able to do. We talked about annexation. Work in the village, property was mentioned that was not within the village limits, but does the village have plans to annex certain properties to either promote business or further enterprise in the community? Special events. That's one thing Lake Bluff does extremely well to help create buzz about our community: block parties, farmers market, we have the criterium race. And infrastructure, we talked about Block 1, investing in that street as a possibility. Other infrastructure that creates desirability for the community, whether it be streetscape or parks and so forth, or investment at the beachfront, but all those things help make Lake Bluff a desirable place to live and visit. Any questions about that? Moving right along. if I can, there we go. So other people play a role. I won't spend a lot of time here, but the Chamber of Commerce plays a role. They do a lot of connecting, I'll say business to business, to try to help promote business within the community. They support special events as well in the community, do a lot to support our merchants, mostly kind of, and that's kind of evolved over time as from a mom and pop type activity of support. There, in the Chamber of Commerce in Lake Forest and Lake Bluff is pretty remarkable on how far it goes and the number of members. Chambers of Commerce struggle in this day and age. The Lake Forest, Lake Bluff one is an exception. A lot of great longtime members that help keep that going and going well. Lake County Partners, some of you may have heard of before. Lake County Partners is the economic development arm of our county. They are funded through the county. Think of them as the economic development department for the Lake County government. They spend a lot of time on helping people like Sam Badger and closing gaps for certain financial deals and to help generate large numbers of jobs. More regional employment issues, certainly large, like the Amazons of the universe or the U-Lines. That's the type of businesses they're chasing and trying to support. And also trying to do a lot of lobbying to support infrastructure, transportation, to help support the greater Lake County region. The Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, they've had support for various village projects. They helped close the gap on the Target project, actually finding several hundreds of thousands of dollars to help do improvements that IDOT should have done a long time ago. They helped supported that and close that gap to build and widen Waukegan Road. To help support that development, but they've helped out the village from time to time. We actually have that's where we are seeking a grant right now to rebuild Block 1. But they do a lot of support, and they've been very involved during the last 24 months during COVID and helping communicate to the business community about the regulatory environment that they're dealing with. And the US EDA also, again, much larger scale projects that we probably would never see here in Lake Bluff, but they certainly are a player and other bigger, more regional projects. Okay, so let's try to jump into this SWOT analysis and go through this. So while you're going through this, think about geography, think about the village's brand. We've talked about that in the past. At the last meeting, think about infrastructure needs, think about connectivity, and to some degree, if you can, think about policies and politics that you think may be important to the village of Lake Bluff. I'll try to maybe step in on some of those things from time to time. So everybody knows what a SWOT analysis is. We're going to be looking at, what do we do well? What can we do better at? Where do we think is the best chances to do better at things? And what are we worried about as we try to do these things and thinking about developing this? And hopefully some of these things will lead to plan elements here. So this was a list that I put together, I've done over the years here, building on what are the things that make, what's Lake Bluff? Why are we neat? Why are we better than most? Why are we a great place to raise a family? Why are we a great place to have a business? What do we do well? This is not intended to be an all-encompassing list, and I'm hopeful that you all will have things to add to this. So I'm taking out my pen and paper, and I'm going to be all ears.
There's a lot of stuff on the list, Drew. It's a pretty good list.
Well, John, what about good restaurants? Is that on there? Oh, it is, number 8.
Yeah. It's actually pretty thorough. Let's see. I don't know, man. I looked at it yesterday. I don't have a lot to add, and I'm pretty creative.
Hey, Drew?
Yes, sir.
Do you happen to have available the survey that was done as part of the 97 comp plan that was sent out to the residents? It had an over 50% response rate, and a lot of those questions were, I think, answered in that survey.
I know we have it somewhere, and we've done surveys since then. And I, to the extent that we could do a survey and maybe that's, I'm going to write.
No, I'm not suggesting we do another one. I'm suggesting that
Yeah.
maybe the members of the commission have access to it and see it, because it's amazing to me how things have remained the same as far as what people like going back that many years.
Okay, I will dig that up, and I will also circulate the previous survey, the most recent one that we did, I think it was in 15 or 16.
Yeah.
We did a joint one with the Park District and the school district.
Yeah.
Yep, I will circulate that. Thank you.
And Drew, the only thing I think I'd add in here is we already have a target of auto companies and such. So that's a pretty big strength, and maybe that can also be embellished.
Got you, thank you.
I was actually thinking connectivity, but I don't know if that would fall under number 23, walkability and bikeability. Like, I feel like it's easy to get around. There's a lot of connectivity on paths and through neighborhoods and what have you. I don't know if you need to differentiate that from
I can just
walkability.
add to it, yeah. Good. And if I could just, Deb, when you say auto-related, are you thinking like more auto park or more like even auto-centric businesses like a car wash or something like, I mean, I don't know what.
Auto-centric in a sense, but it could also be other dealerships and
Got you.
such. I mean, it seems
Yep.
like they gravitate toward each other. So,
Yep,
and the same thing, I mean, we do have a strong, just from the Chamber of Commerce background, we have a strong health and wellness kind of, they tend to be smaller businesses, but then you've also got the proximity to Lake Forest Hospital, you've got growing medical practices here and such. So maybe something, health and wellness, and maybe that's already on here and I just didn't notice.
no, I don't know that it is, so I'm writing it down, health and wellness-related businesses. We have, I don't think the hospital's on here, they just announced an expansion, didn't they?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because, yep, so I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah, I know not a lot of people are using this right now, but the train and the proximity to Chicago, the ability to get down to Chicago on the train. I mean, I know we're not quite in that space right now, given COVID and just the nature of the city right now, but I feel like that might be, that's a strength.
Okay, yeah, it is, for sure.
Well, and along with that, Joy, would be, we're practically dead center between Milwaukee and Chicago.
Okay.
So for people who go either direction or use either airport.
It's a good point.
Good one.
Yeah, just not Midway.
Right.
How about our level of volunteerism?
Yep,
Hey, Drew,
yes, sir.
were you talking under weaknesses about that western entrance into the community on number 12? How far west are you actually talking about? I mean, we going back to Waukon Road or is it over the tracks,
Oh, yeah,
There's such a difference there. And if you're not from Lake Bluff and you look at the Target
Yeah.
side and then you look at the other side.
are we ready to jump? I mean, we can toggle back and forth, but yeah, I think the idea there with number 12 was, I was going back to the tollway, right? I've heard before I even moved to Lake Bluff, people had said, a lot of realtors won't even bring people in that way in town, right? They would send them down on Route 60 and bring people in town that way versus.
Yeah, that's what it was when they did. I think Brad can speak to this. Maybe he has it in his old files when they promoted Tangley Oaks. I don't think they showed 176. They had everybody coming up Green Bay Road from Deer Path.
Probably.
Yeah.
When Stonebridge was a corporate retreat facility,
Yeah.
they
Harrison.
brought all their guests in from Green Bay Road to the
Okay.
south.
Yeah.
And it's really not, I mean, it looks terrible going all the way out to the tollway, but quite frankly, from the Route 41 going east, it looks pretty shabby as well. I mean, the entrance into the village, and we've talked about it, the village has talked about, a greenway coming in, and we haven't accomplished that yet.
Well, Brad, I don't know if you've been back on 176, just east of 41 lately, but we're taking out all of the non-native species on the north side.
I saw that today. It's exciting. You can see the golf course.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's, we heard you.
When I was on the park board,
Yeah.
That was something we were trying to do a long time, to create some long views to the north as you come into town. Give you some spatial relief from the commercial corridor. So yeah, it's great to see it happening finally.
Yeah.
Brad's shots will now hit 176 with ease.
It's what I referred to in a text to you a couple of years ago, Drew. I called it aesthetic pruning, referring to cleaning up the sight line on our east-west streets going towards the lake. Why not open up that sight line rather than allow the trees to encroach in it?
Yeah. Beautification by chainsaw.
Yeah, well, it works.
Mhm. Forest Park and Lake Forest.
Yeah.
Well, Drew, it's great to see that happening.
Yeah, well, great.
it is.
Mhm.
So what are the other warts? W for warts and weaknesses.
No, I mean, the tax rate and the overall tax burden, I think, is one of the struggles we deal with in our business.
It's number one here. Even though it's all relative, right? You know,
Right.
we're on the medal stand, but we're not with the blue ribbon, unfortunately.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, under weaknesses, maybe, I don't know if it's in one of these here or not, but just, sometimes it takes a long time for the development. That's all. Everybody'd like to see things happen faster, whether that's the old Northern Trust Bank or the Stonebridge property or, a corridor or whatever. Everything just takes so long sometimes, but that's
Yeah.
development.
Yeah.
How about the zoning in the city? The CBD has multiple layers of different kinds of zoning for different kinds of businesses, including all the special use permits. So it's really inconsistent from one building or from one business to another. And then the zoning for the real estate looks similar. There's all different types of zonings, and it seems like it changes, on a somewhat regular basis from decade to decade.
Yeah, full disclosure, John and I talked about this earlier, but was it Saturday? When were we talking about this?
Yeah, a couple days ago.
But the idea of, think about Lake Bluff as a downtown. Think about, I don't know how many of you guys get to Wilmette or Winnetka, but there's like clusters. What's happened on the North Shore is that the smaller brick and mortar retail establishment has faded away, and there's been more of food, beverage, entertainment type. That's the type of users that are occupying.
Service-oriented things like that.
Yeah, central business districts, but the village's zoning still reflects the hurdles of
The old ones.
having special use permits and extraordinary review. And I'll tell you why. And it's not uncommon to have those types of hurdles to step over to get approvals. And it's because of all the reasons you would imagine. It's like, well, how are you going to manage parking? And how are you going to, if you're in an area that has residents above, what are your hours of operation? And so you have these public hearings and this process that does take time and it does take money. And which are negatives in terms of, you remember what Sam said, the idea of tear down these barriers to development. Well, maybe the village needs to think about how we do and what we do, how clear of a path do we cut for restaurants, food and beverage, knowing we know what our hurdles are, right? We know the parking issues. We know, so do we modify our code to reflect that, to incent those types, more of those businesses to add to the character and add to the diversity of choices for consumers in our area? And there's trade-offs with that, but that's I think it's what John and I talked about.
I think it's worthwhile to look at, maybe there's some room in there to streamline some of those zoning regulations, and we can go back in and look at ways to make it, maybe not eliminate completely, but figure out a way to streamline it so that it's a little easier, not so many hurdles, since we're seeing so many more of those restaurants and and more service-oriented businesses.
Was thinking we
That's a
could
good point.
create an overall CBD structure of zoning so that every retail space that's in the CBD would have to follow the certain basic guidelines, both of type of business and then impact on its community around it. And as long as it met those basic guidelines, the businesses could change back and forth from whatever they need to be during one decade to a different one in a different decade, or even every 5 years or whatever. Certainly the town right now is drastically different than it was 10 years ago. And then drastically different from that, just, 20 years or 10 years before that. But we can make it streamlined and still keep the guidelines so that we keep the type of community that we want. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But I tell you right now, it's a huge pain to change. I mean, we've gone through two different zoning, or we're going to soon here, two different zoning board of reviews to change 500 square feet of space in our basement. That certainly is not inviting to new businesses to come into town. For something that nobody sees on the street generally has a small impact. To have to go through two different things to change the space over twice is more of an impediment than I think that it needs to be.
John,
And if
you've
a
opened.
business owner that doesn't live in town now, or that doesn't operate in town now, and you're coming into the community, you might have one set of rules for one retail space and a different set of rules for a different retail space. It's difficult to know where you stand.
John, you've opened businesses in Lake Forest, in Libertyville, City of Chicago, perhaps other places. I mean, I don't know, on a continuum of easy or complete logjam. I don't know where we fall on that.
Generally, what I've experienced is I don't have quite the same experience with the four of the communities we've done things in, because we generally stuck to what was already existing.
Okay.
I think that our particular situation here is unique because we have so many little pieces and little things we try to do. And we also have the original special use permit that governs our particular space, but not necessarily all of our buildings. So there's just, I think right now this is just a little bit different for us. And I'm not trying to use this as something to change something for me, because none of this will affect us by the time anything we can change. But I think it should be easy for business owners that either want to do something different, or a new business owner coming into town. They have a nice, easy, clean understanding of what they can do and what they can't do, regardless of where their particular address is.
Yeah,
Right now, I don't feel like it is that way.
Yeah, so I guess I don't know, when you started your business at Everett Farms and that former restaurant location, I don't know if there was a special use there that they were permitted to transfer to you, or is that controlled by the property owner, like where you inherited in Avasi?
It was a restaurant before, so we just went through the normal application process of opening a business there, and we had to file for the Lake Forest has its own health permit for restaurants, and not health permit, but its own business permit for restaurants. So we just applied for that and we got it. We didn't have to go through any zoning stuff because it was already a restaurant before.
Okay.
So, but we did, even though we built two restaurants there, they're both considered restaurants, so they didn't view that as being individually different. So we didn't have to do any special zoning reviews as far as the contents of what were inside the space. They just left that as it is and let us put two restaurants there. The only thing we had to do was show the different sides of the building that had different signage, but even that was just one application. So we didn't really have anything extra to do from that perspective.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah,
Drew,
I guess.
go ahead.
Just real quickly, the analogy I'm thinking in the back of my mind is it's basically it's a Chevy chassis that's been added on to over time, and there's times we should probably start over with the chassis and build versus an older vehicle. Really look at this thing as a fresh look, and that's where the streamlining can come in. Because I agree. I know the rules around here pretty well, but for an outsider, it's difficult to navigate. So it's streamlining. I'm not sure how you do it, but it would be an objective that would be nice to have.
And
Yeah.
Drew, does the same kind of thing work in the light industry area? Because it seems like everything there seems to have to go through special use permits.
It's gotten better over there because of the Waukegan Road Corridor study. One of the specific recommendations from that study was to open up, broaden the uses as of right. And that has made things easier for there. In fact, interesting enough, some of the things that are still difficult there are more retail-oriented businesses. Those are still more special use oriented, like restaurants and so forth, even though the village does want those to happen. So the idea of going back and revisiting some of those things and saying, hey, maybe you should go back and revisit these things. And to Rob's point, in the central business district, and this is another nuance, again, one of the biggest issues that come up at every every public hearing is parking, parking, parking. Well, we know that, Rob, you developed Block 1, you know you can't create new parking spaces out of thin air, right? You don't have a place to put them anymore. To John's point is, where he's occupying and Ron Osterline's building there in Center Avenue Partners, they were granted extreme zoning relief for parking, but where, they know new tenants are going to come and go. Some maybe have more parking demand than others, but nonetheless I think there's probably ways to streamline that to make it more, to John's exact point, to have the specific standards. If you can satisfy these 5 standards, then maybe it's your path from A to B is a lot shorter.
Yeah, I think it's worth looking into for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay, we're going to keep moving. So opportunities, we talked about the 41-176 interchange project. Block 3 is on here. That's one I'm sure people have thought about. That's an opportunity for the village to maybe capture more diversified housing product. That's what the village's current comprehensive land use plan identifies that as, transitional residential from the CBD to detached single family. I'm sure there's more things on this list that people are thinking about.
I think embellishing our multifamily zoning district and correcting the overlying zoning would help.
Did you say embellish the multifamily zoning?
Well, our R5 zoning district and the zoning regulations that apply to it don't allow for multifamily use.
That's true. Whatever the products that are, any multifamily product, I think I can say this with a straight face, any multifamily product in the R5 zoning district, the existing regulations would not permit those structures to be there today.
Exactly my point. So why do we have an R5 district if we don't encourage it? So the opportunity is to look for opportunities within the village for multifamily.
Rewrite multifamily to actually create multifamily. Yeah.
Make it doable.
Now, one thing the village just did recently with the accessory dwelling units, I think it's a phenomenal change and opportunity for Lake Bluff, and I hope people kind of take notice of it, because I think it's one of the most progressive things we've done in the last 20 years.
Agree.
I'm writing that down. But it'll be interesting to see, monitoring, maybe that's another metric, is monitoring that. And did the village, that was one of the things that the PCZBA, when they recommended that program to the village board, was, hey, we probably want to go back and revisit this and say, instead of making this special use, do you want to make this as of right to help facilitate this?
And that's what it takes, because very few people are willing to put up the money to chase a dream unless there's some underlying support for it.
Right.
I think, what did we say, 5, like something like 5 years?
5
We want
years,
to look at it
yep.
for 5 years and then
Yep.
possibly make it as of right.
Well, I'm gonna move to threats then. What are some threats to the village's success in creating a nice and productive business environment?
I love that two of them are the state we're located in.
Yeah.
We've investigated succession and it doesn't seem possible, so. The People's Republic of Lake Bluff is not an opportunity we can have.
Everything's possible, Drew.
Well, Drew, I don't know if I brought this up with you one time, a long time ago, Drew, but I think one of a significant threat we have is that there are properties within our school district that are not within the control of the village, that if developed could have create a huge burden on our school districts. So I think we have to make sure that we maintain whatever intergovernmental agreements we have with neighbors.
And that feeds right into going back to like the 41-176 area where those properties, there are residential units in that area that are within the school district, but the village also doesn't control the density or that's an area that the village's comprehensive land use plan identifies as an area the village should pursue annexation of, which is a long-term, it would take a long time for those properties to turn and change, but the idea of controlling the intensity of development, that's one way to achieve that, right? Is have it under.
Drew, how long is that process? I'm just curious.
I'm sorry?
How long is the annexation process?
It depends. It really depends. There's the quickest way for annexation to occur is having two parties that want to make it happen. So it's a friendly annexation. That can happen really, really quickly. There's certain case law has dictated how if the village wholly surrounds a property, it's like a donut, we can annex it and they can't fight us on it. I think the village you may know some of this history, John. I know Brad and Deb and most people here, there's been a pretty hairy history about the village looking at the Knollwood area over time, various parts of it, annexed or not annexed. There's been advisory referendums that have not gone well. But it all depends on the parties involved and how willing they are to be part of the village.
How do you identify if a residential district would be willing to or not? Like Knollwood, do we ask them? Like, how does it work?
Well, that's the village put it to a vote and they asked its own residents about what it would want to do. I think there's usually that there's some inertia by, most of the time, John, it happens because there's a necessity, whether it be a sanitary sewer or water, some sort of utility issue that says, hey, the village can be a provider, we can help you, you need us, we need you, and there's maybe some connectivity. So that has been, usually that's not uncommon for that to happen that way. But it's usually pretty grassroots.
Well, that's how the sanctuary came into the village. Right?
Tell the story, please.
Well, I don't remember exactly, but I don't think the sanctuary would have been developed had they not been given the opportunity to become part of the village of Lake Bluff and be part of the school district and everything else. But they did that by jumping across Route 41, right?
Stringing together parcels, yes, yeah. But that was, of course, that was challenged by residents of the village. So, yeah.
So I had a couple things I was thinking here. I know it's shown up in other areas, but maybe not just people, affluent, educated moving out of Illinois, but people moving out of Lake Bluff because, again, they don't have the housing that they need as they age. So we lose people to Libertyville or Lake Forest or what have you, which I think is just a little different than number 3
yeah.
there.
A threat being a lack of diversity of housing.
Yeah, and then the other thing, and I don't really know how to word this, but I feel like, when we went through the issue with Airbnb and people were putting up, it's not social media, but putting up signage, Deb, maybe you could figure out
Right.
a wording for this signage that was like, we want to keep our kids safe, like that,
Right, the fear mongering kind of.
yeah, I'm not sure how to actually write that down, but
Inflammatory discourse?
there you go.
Good PR term.
Thank you.
I just
Reading it.
remember when that was going on, realtors were saying people are seeing these signs and they're like, what's happening in your community? So that to me is a threat from
Well, and also
a
as a
stability
part of that,
standpoint.
yeah, as a part of that, how do we get that silent middle to get engaged so we know what they want? You know, when I think we've seen some developments, for instance, that and we're seeing it in other surrounding communities and everything where development, the people who control the social media seem to be doing very well to get their way, but we haven't even heard from the middle group that has a vote, I would imagine, but they just are either feeling demonized or they're feeling like they don't want to be participants in it. How do we get that group engaged so that we really understand what our community wants on some of these issues?
Maybe it's
Yeah,
an
that's-
opportunity.
That's, and there's different methods, and you have a background in marketing, Deb. I mean, there are cities that, I can go to conferences of city managers, and there'll be businesses there that are in the business of doing surveys and polling. I mean, that's not uncommon for communities, certainly larger than us, that do polling to get ideas about those issues, to try to get, tap that voice that may not be coming through, loudly or getting stepped over by others, because it's, as you said, it can be overwhelming.
Right.
But, focus groups, and there's different ways to do that. That's the thing we've talked about here internally, and I would say that's probably true of most municipalities, is like the process, the legal prescribed process for development is set by others, and sometimes it is, and certainly in seems like in contemporary world, the loudest voice wins, but it may not necessarily have the best outcomes. So you can create additional processes to help inform advisory bodies in the village board that are not required, but they are probably could be more informative, right? These ideas of saying, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to follow the required, John DeRossier wants to start a new business, wants to open up a meatball sandwich store in the downtown, which he doesn't, for the record. But if he did, and he wanted to have a public hearing, and maybe there's the anti-meatball establishment that's out there that comes into every zoning hearing and waves their, meatball sign and down with meatballs, and chases John out of town when 75% of the community really wanted a meatball sandwich from John.
Right.
So, yeah, there's different processes the village can build. But again, to John DeRossier's point earlier tonight, that takes time, takes
Right.
money. So, and it's, some of this gets back to, having clear visions and clear plans and executing them, and saying, that can be a big part of it too, having plans and having, sticking to them.
Right.
Joe, I think one more threat that might be on here is one from ourselves. I say this from an outside perspective, looking at the results of some of the things in the village in the almost 13 years that we've been here. We haven't built, as far as I know, we haven't really built any new housing in the village in the entire time that Innovazi has been here. And our population is less than it was when we opened the restaurant. And that combined with just general comments that I hear from our consumers and people around town, there's a, I don't know, I'm not going to give a percentage, but there's a lot of people in town that really do not want the village to grow. They don't want more people in town. They don't want a new development built. Certainly the people that have an entire forest behind them don't want a new development to be built. And I think, combined with our difficulty of zoning and maybe our the perception that it's difficult to get things done here, at least from a housing perspective, leads to, I think, overall negative effects. It leads to higher property taxes and less, less people living in town, less people, that contribute to the, to our school system and the expense of that. And some of that is internal. Some of that are decisions that we make as a community over time that lead to results that are maybe not the most favorable thing for the community. I would bet if you ask everyone in town, nobody wants to be paying as much as they pay in taxes to live there or to own property in the community now. But a lot of them also may not want to do some of the things it takes to lower that burden. So I think we might be a little bit of our own worst enemy in some respects by not opening ourselves up to different ideas and still trying to maintain, the really positive, beautiful community we love, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was very well said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Great point.
I agree.
I got it. It's a threat. Yeah, and let me say this too. This is, let me go on and get to this. So kind of like next steps, we've got about 16 minutes before Brad starts throwing tomatoes at us. What we can do is you may go home and think about this some more, and Deb's great for sending follow-up emails the next day. She'll say, I was up all night thinking about this, and she'll send me an email. But I encourage you to do the same. If something came up, hey, I thought of 2 new strengths and 4 other weaknesses and 3 threats, send them to me. This is going to be a dynamic process. And what I'd like to do is start putting together, based off your comments, a plan that you all can start to edit. And I'm going to take these comments and supplement the SWOT that I've put together and start assembling a plan together with working with Joy, and we can come back as a group and finalize this and kind of think about, okay, we need to do better here or more here, and even start looking at some of the metrics, and I'll put in some of that other data that we were talking about, some of those metrics earlier, and help give us some sort of temporal analysis so we can have that context too. How does that sound to everybody?
Good. Thank you.
Sounds good.
Great.
I have a question about the bank in Scranton. Is any news on that, or do we know what is going on there?
Are you
You're
talking about Block 3?
Block 3, Soledad?
The bank.
Oh, yes.
Because that can be a strength, a weakness, an opportunity
Yeah,
altogether.
right, exactly. 100%. Let me, so the short answer is that there was some conversations had late last year with one of the property owners who indicated that he was still in conversations with a developer who thought that they may be able to pencil out a 2-story product there of condos. But that they did not have the properties assembled. So it's, I would classify that as an idea. But there's nothing imminent. Nobody has submitted anything. There's no plans. I have nothing to share with anybody, with the board or anybody. There's nothing to be shared other than that's the last I've heard. I know that to John DeRossier's point about, one of the threats is ourselves. You look to our neighbor to the south, they are struggling with some people that are interested in developing some properties that I don't think most people would consider, iconic structures in the community by any stretch, but somehow it becomes difficult for some other reasons. And it's a little bit difficult to conceive that some of these projects would be viewed as bad, but maybe so. I don't pretend to know all of the ins and outs of them, but Certainly, the villages, again, long-range land use plan calls for Block 3 to be developed as transitional zoning from CBD to detached single-family. The difficulty, again, is scale and the small postage size footprint to try to do that in well. But I guess I'm not super optimistic that something's going to happen soon. I will tell you, and Brad, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it is a phenomenal piece of property. I mean, you think about proximity to the central business district, proximity to the village's lakefront, the metro service, all the things that we've listed, whether the strengths of the community can probably be said about that property alone. It's just.
I agree 100%. And
Yeah.
we had 4 board members vote against it. I
So-
mean, that's the frustration. That is, in a nutshell, the frustration with developers in getting things through in the village, because it depends on the current mood of the neighbors and how those in charge react to the people adjacent to it, in my mind, without regard for what's better for the overall community.
Hey, Drew, what is it zoned as right now still? Just commercial
The
property?
Block 3?
Yeah,
Yeah, roughly speaking, the west side of the property is zoned as CBD, which is Central Business District, which limits it to 2 stories. And the eastern side of it, it's actually 5 separate lots. The eastern 2 lots are zoned R4, which is detached single family.
But it's detached, single family, by right, 1 lot.
Correct.
Yeah, it's just a smidge under 2 buildable lots. You can only build 1 structure there, 1 single family house as of right.
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 So,
this is one piece of property, right?
It's under, there's, of the 5, there's 1 owner that owns 3 of the 5 lots and 1 owner that owns 2 of the 5 lots, the eastern lot. So it's
Okay.
2 different property owners for the entire south side of that block.
Okay.
But when you talk zoning, I do think that's kind of, Drew, what you were saying. We're in a market that everything is selling. And you've got a piece of property that close to town, that close to the train, that close to the lake, and it's not been able to have a viable product put forth with the current zoning. So that, to me, is the problem.
And the village developed a tool to try to bridge that, but it's which allows, that goes back to the issue that the village tried to develop a tool that allowed for a lot of creativity and very few bulk restrictions, but at the end of the day, the board did approve of 1 bulk restriction, the height
Right.
in there,
Right.
that I think was probably, certainly.
Right, that's the problem.
Yeah, so.
Yep.
So,
Can I just say one quick thing? At least from my perspective, that 3rd floor would be needed because of the value of the land.
Yep.
There was,
Exactly.
they paid too much for the land, and now they got themselves in a corner, and here we are.
so what do we do? Punish the landowner and leave it undeveloped or not developed in the best possible way? Or do we look beyond that and say, okay, here's where we are today. How can we make it the best possible?
I don't know what the answer is, except,
Yeah.
You have a gap between what the land was bought for and what it's worth once it's developed. And the only way they can make it work is by getting a zoning variance. And then you've got 2 different zoning types right side by side, and it's going to be a flashpoint. I don't. It's a really tough situation. I don't have an answer, but yeah, you get friction whenever you have 2 different zoning areas touching.
In the
Here we
same
are.
little tiny block, who thought that was a good idea?
What was that, John?
We said in the same little tiny block. Who thought that was a good idea?
Well, you know, that this is the kind of, I'm going to stay positive here and say that those types of things force a lot of creativity. And so I'm optimistic that something good will come from this. That will be a beautiful new landmark on the village's probably most popular street, right?
Popular block.
Let's move that to the top of the list on all SWOT.
Okay. Well, like I said, if you guys, keep them coming.
Yeah.
So, John, or Drew,
Yeah,
before we end,
yeah.
one of the things that the village did do that I thought was very progressive with regard to multifamily is enter a contest to look at the development of the corner of Sheridan Road and North Avenue, where the village owns a portion of that property, and some plans came forward for that. Has the village pursued that in any way since that competition?
Well, you know, that I would say this, I think the village, one of the reasons the village entered into that because, let me do this. I want to show everybody the same piece of property we're talking, so nobody's guessing where we are.
And I'm really thinking about this from the perspective of a retailer or a restaurateur like John, but you need bodies to support these businesses, whether it's Gary Lawrence's building or Soledad's business or John's restaurants. You need people in close proximity where it's a convenience to shop locally. And if we don't somehow create some density that most planning people would say is imperative right around the CBD, then I think we're just talking without a clear vision.
Yeah.
Brad, I think you hit that right on the head. I mean, I drive through Highwood now and I see what's going on down there, all those places going up. There will be all sorts of people to visit the downtown. Same with Highland Park,
Absolutely.
and like the whole Lake Forest thing, on McKinley there. That's what they keep trying to do, add more housing. After
Right.
they turned all the apartments into offices, now they want to go back to apartments again.
Well, I'll tell you, Market Square was much more vibrant when the whole second floor was filled with residents.
Residential.
It was, yeah. I mean, now Jeff and I had talked about that at one point, and do we look at doing offices up here and get more rent money or not, or what? And we decided we liked the fact of having people up there.
Yeah.
So, I think it's great. But I totally agree. More people, more bodies.
Give me 1 second. If you bear with me, I'll give everybody a quick summary. Well, and if I don't find it in the next 2 minutes, I will send everybody I'll just send you a link. We have a quick, I think a 60-second video that we kind of give everybody a quick overview of what the missing middle, what that experience was. And to answer your original question, Brad, I think the village did it, and one of the reasons the village did it was to try to see if there was any desire that showed that the village was open to something, and that particular property is already zoned for 3 stories. But there was 0 petitions, there was 0 calls generated from people saying, hey, I'm interested in trying to do something, which I think was a little bit of a surprise that nobody showed any interest, because some of the projects were a little more, I'll say, out of scale with maybe what the village would ultimately approve, but there were interesting ideas that had a variety of housing product types that were taking advantage of that great location also. And I mean, again, it's the village is an owner of property in that particular block. It's already zoned to go 3 stories. I think that is an opportunity that it could be even more prepared for redevelopment in that regard in terms of entitlement than Block 3 is. So I'll send everybody out as part of this additional data dump. I'll send you that missing middle piece so you guys can understand exactly what we're talking about there.
And you said that's at North and Sheridan?
Across from the train station.
Yeah, where there used to be a gas station at the corner of North and Sheridan.
Right.
Oh, yeah, that Arvidsson.
And
Okay.
the tailor
Yeah.
shop, that 3-story ugly building, though it's sold.
Yeah.
But that, if you were to combine that corner where it abuts up against the townhouses on North Avenue, it would
This corner here.
take quite a bit of space. And then there's also all that village-owned
Oh, yeah.
green space that could
Oh,
be.
yeah. Arvidsson.
So this quarter of this site, the village owns this green corner here.
That's right.
Brookside Clean, this
Yeah,
building is,
Arvidsson.
Is that a parking lot back there?
this
That's
is a
lot?
parking lot that serves this 3-story building, which has retail on the first floor and multifamily above. I think it
Yeah.
has 8 units above, I think.
I think it's 8,
Yeah.
6 or 8.
Wow.
But the village, when we did this, we threw this parcel, we included this with we talked to the owners of this, the reverse L property, if you will, and said, hey, we'd like to do this. Are you comfortable with that? And they said, sure. Thinking maybe they would get some idea or interest, thinking, oh, maybe we should pursue something ourselves. As I understand it, properties like this structure and others along North Avenue, these, multifamilies, these are great portfolio fillers in terms of good returns on investments. And it's people don't necessarily want to rattle that or take risk. But the short answer is nobody's bid on it yet, Brad.
But it hasn't really been offered to anyone, has it?
No, again, the village could get aggressive and say, hey, we want to issue RFP. It depends on what the village's tolerance is for risk and for folks, maybe saying the village is being, having a different opinion on how aggressive the village is and trying to create other housing types in the village. But, we could work in hand with this property owner and solicit, what's that, find the right project. Maybe somebody can find some way for a deal to happen. It can be done.
I think it's just the appetite of the village, because, I know that the property in question, the 3-story building, sold recently for more money than I would have guessed it would have, over $1 million, I believe, which makes that too expensive to develop as an individual parcel. But if the village were to throw in at no cost and provide for adequate zoning to do a multifamily thing there, where that guy could get his money back out of it and have some financial reward for participation, you could do that whole parcel to a much greater extent than the one directly to the east of it that's sitting on a 100-foot wide lot and with six residences. And, it's that type of, I think you have to just say, rather than nobody's come forward, it's like, this is what we want to get done. Now we're going to go out and reach out to people.
Well, I think the village board is looking for you all to give them direction and say the village should take a more aggressive posture in doing these things.
Okay.
We'll see how much they end up liking that.
Well, this is why you're here, to tell them that, hey, you want to have a better economy? Have more people, have more consumers.
Good.
Okay.
Oh my God, it's 9 o'clock already.
It's time.
Time flies when you're having fun. Okay. I've got good stuff. Thank you.
Does anyone have any more questions or comments? No. Okay. Drew, do you have a report for tonight?
I have no other report.
No other report, that's it. I do not have a report for tonight. Does anyone have a report?
Oh, you know what? That's not true.
Wait,
Not
Drew's
true.
got it.
I'm sorry. I don't want to keep everybody, but I did want to show this. This is kind of, bear with me 1 second. It's kind of a neat thing. I just found out. But I hate to speak out of school, but it is kind of neat. This is related to the business environment. So today, I received a communication from the Lake Bluff Criterium Race Director, Marco Colbert, who let me know that there's a new National Crit Series announcement that includes all the big cities that you're familiar with: St. Louis, Indianapolis, Littleton, Colorado, Lake Bluff, Salt Lake City, Boise. But our bike race is part of this major U.S. national race series now.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
right above Little Town.
Yeah, so.
awesome.
We're the biggest small town in there, maybe, I don't know, Harlem, I don't know, but New York
That's cool.
City. Yeah, so again, and this will be true for the villages. This will be the 10th criterium race the village has had, 10th year. So I thought that was exciting.
That's excellent.
Cool.
That's great news.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so a good note. So
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion
And
to
on that
adjourn.
part,
All right. Could I get a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
A second?
Thank you.
So you just say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 We are adjourned.
Adjourn. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.